At 4:17 a.m., the silence hung over the border outside Semenivka and the black waters off Mariupol, until it was abruptly broken. Russian armored columns rolled south with 50 T-90M tanks and UR-77 mine clearers, and from the Black Sea, Chinese landing ships launched J-15 fighters and landing craft carrying 300 Marines. This wasn't a raid, it was a coordinated decapitation attack, a two-way assault designed to cut Ukraine's defenses in half and bludgeon a road directly to Mariupol. But the enemy had no idea they were already being surveilled. Hours before, American-built MQ-9B Sky Guardian drones flying at 20,000 feet spotted unusual armored formations to the north and a flotilla of warships creasing the southern horizon. Within minutes, Ukraine's general staff convened a crisis cell and made a ruthless but brilliant choice. Don't meet power with power. Lure it in. Radar grids along both corridors went dark, making the airspace appear exposed. A trap disguised as weakness. Behind the cover of darkness, guns moved into place, 155mm howitzers buried in the ground, mechanized brigades concealed in irrigation canals, suicide drones buzzing on flatbeds, special forces blending into empty farmhouses on radio silence. The kill box was rigged by 3 a.m. Quiet came back again. Troops holding their breath, hearts racing, until at last the quiet was shattered. Russian mine-clearing tanks exploded charges into the ground, revealing nothing, fooling the invaders into thinking the road was clear. The lead wave of T-90MS thundered ahead, and the ambush erupted in full fury. Remote-controlled mine drones burst from trenches, small but deadly, their shaped charges ripping at composite armor. One tank's turret went 50 feet into the air, others exploded in fire, and the proud armored column became a scene of utter madness. At the same time, down on the southern coast, Chinese landing craft closed up within 1.5 miles of shore, only to be hit by Ukrainian Bayraktar TB2 drones. Missiles hit the bows of hovercraft, catapulting armored vehicles into the surf as black smoke poured into the air. Panic broke out. Wagner mercenaries ran into each other in flight. Chinese Marines jumped from blazing decks into ice water, their measured advance disintegrating into chaos. And as tanks blazed and ships smoldered, the skies ignited. J-15 fighters shrieked overhead, firing missiles, but Ukraine was prepared. From secret bases, Su-27s and MiG-29s rocketed upward, colliding with them head-on in blazing dogfights over the Black Sea. Missiles illuminated the dawn like shooting stars, ripping jets from the sky, their debris splashing into waves. Then the air defense network of Ukraine stirred. NASAMS batteries and old but lethal Buk M1 launchers fired volleys of rockets. Contrails stretched high, Chinese planes burst apart in midair, and burning wreckage rained into the sea. Before the second wave passed, 6 J-15s were eliminated from the sky, setting the battlefield ablaze, with smoke and shock consuming it. The North gave no quarter to the invaders. Wagner convoys reeled as they tried to regroup from the mine robot ambush. Hordes of Ukrainian kamikaze drones shrieked in low over 100 miles an hour, hugging the terrain just 50 feet off the ground before crashing into fuel trucks and ammunition carriers. The explosions tore along the supply line, fireballs reaching high into the morning sky, choking smoke obscuring drivers as cars careened off the road in terror. The battlefield disintegrated into flames and mayhem. Anti-aircraft tracers sewed blazing threads across the skies. Bayraktar drones crept in cold hover above, delineating targets, as fulcrums and flankers fought against Chinese fighters in corkscrew arcs above. From the ground, Ukrainian air defenses rained missiles into the bedlam, making the horizon a field of death of blazing planes, plummeting drones, and deafening thunder. At 5:30, what was once a Russian-Chinese calculated advance had turned into a slaughterhouse. And the trap was only getting tighter. In the neighborhood of Semenivka, Russian armor, already decimated and low on fuel, attempted to regroup, only to be struck with a merciless counterattack. The 93rd Mechanized Brigade charged from the line of trees, dirt bikes revving through the smoke as infantry zagged between burning tanks, firing RPG-7s into open flanks before disappearing once more. A rider braked hard, losing a rocket that tore through a T-90. The crew bailing from the fireball as rounds cooked off within. Next, the earth trembled. The rumble of 30 T-84 Oplot main battle tanks rumbling in, ceramic armor glinting through mist, slicing across fields at 45 miles an hour. Their 125mm guns bludgeoned like sledgehammers, tearing apart troop carriers and command cars, sending Wagner fighters fleeing in fear. Surrounded by bikers at their sides and oplots blocking the road in front, the Russians were squeezed in a vice of steel. Anxious to get out, they backed directly into an obscured belt of mines. A T-90's one set of tracks was sheared off, closing the highway. Shortly thereafter, a BMP exploded in a blast that tossed its turret into the air like a coin. In minutes, the corridor was a graveyard of blazing wrecks, cutting off any hope of retreat. By 5:55, Semenova's fields were a pit of fire. Russian tanks immobilized, supply lines cut, and the once feared spearhead now just scattered crews and broken steel. What had started as a push forward was now in collapse. And as Russian troops collapsed in the north, so too was the southern front hurtling into its own horror. By 6 o'clock, Chinese landing troops drove their craft onto shallow shores at Mariupol, ramps crashing into the surf as naval troops splashed ashore, into a tempest. Under cover of dune-covered bunkers, Ukrainian commandos burst like specters, unleashing javelins and laws at point-blank range. A missile ripped through the engine block of a Type 726 hovercraft, rolling it along in flames, and 5 landing ships were burning in just a few minutes, white-hot skeletal wrecks along the horizon. The water was less an invasion force than a floating cemetery. Those Marines who made it onto the sand were pinned on an exposed beach with no cover. From high dunes, Ukrainian snipers picked them off with precision shots, the crack of every rifle sending squads scattering and cutting men down before they could reassemble. Fear swept through them, rifles left in the sand as survivors clung to the earth, praying for cover that was not there. Air support was called for, but over Mariupol the air was already tainted. Ukrainian kamikaze drones had shredded radar relays and comm nodes, blinding the strike group off the J-15s which were supposed to cover the Chinese landing force now flew blind, sensors useless. The sky above them turned into a dead zone where every movement jeopardized instant death. By 6:10, the beachhead was disintegrating like the Russian spearhead, with Marines slaughtered in droves and blazing ships lighting up the coastline with a dark, hellish glow. What had started as a daring amphibious assault had disintegrated into a slaughter on the shore. 2 minutes hence, Ukraine struck to complete the deed. With Russian armor stuck in burning fields and Chinese troops marooned on bare beaches, the counterattack rolled in from all sides. From the west, Oplot tanks rolled forward, their 125mm shells ripping through T-90s like tissue. From the east, motorcycle units carved through smoke and debris, seeking survivors with RPGs and machine guns. Northward, Bodana howitzers hammered remorselessly, GPS-guided shells wiping out every grid square that the invaders attempted to hold. And southward, special troops and loitering drones locked down the coast, pounding every effort at regrouping. Over 70 armored vehicles were destroyed in an hour, and almost a third of Wagner mercenaries and Chinese Marines killed, wounded, or taken prisoner. By 7 o'clock, the trap jaws closed forever. More than 400 enemy soldiers dead, 150 captured, dozens of tanks and landing craft left in flaming wreckage. Russia's offensive at Semenovka was destroyed, China's bet on the Black Sea lost, and Mariupol remained intact. But through the smoke and twisted steel, one Ukrainian soldier knelt down next to a wounded Chinese Marine and gave him water. A reminder that, in the ugliness of war, there was still humanity. Over the dunes, the Ukrainian flag flew high against a sky blackened by smoke. But even as the reverberations of that triumph echoed down the coast, a fresh storm was brewing. At 5:45 a.m. in Zaporizhia, quiet was broken as a new Russian spearhead of 50 tanks and 70 APCs roared from a seized airbase outside Melitopol, an iron snake of more than 600 soldiers, tons of ammunition, and fuel for 10 days of offense advancing towards Dnipro. It wasn't a confrontation. It was a strategic punch menacing millions. Far down in Dnipro, within a fortified underground command bunker, General Mykola Havrino watched live UAV video of the armored convoy crawling forward at 18 miles an hour. If it got to the forward base, Russia could dig in a fortress that could hit 3 regions within hours. There was no time to wait. Strike them now. Don't let them set in, Havrino commanded, his voice stabbing through the darkened bunker. Orders spread out, coupling air, ground, and artillery into a carefully coordinated counterstrike. The strategy was cold-blooded and calculating. Reconnaissance drones to chart every vehicle, waves of inexpensive suicide drones to blow the formation apart, flying mines to retaliate against defensive fire, motorcycle squadrons to cut the flanks, and mechanized troops to tighten the noose. Time counted, Steel Serpent had to be shattered before it arrived. In minutes, 20 recon drones buzzed the wheat fields at treetop level, streaming back heat silhouettes of tanks, APCs, fuel tankers, and artillery. On the giant screen of the command center, target symbols flickered in red, blue, and yellow. Command tanks, fuel trailers, and mobile cannon all detailed on the map. The Serpent was out in the open, and the trap was about to be sprung. At 6:32, the word was given. 80 suicide drones, constructed for less than $4,000 each but each with a 26-pound shaped charge, screamed in low at 90 miles an hour. Russian gunners blazed wildly, autocannons, grenades, machine guns, but the swarm was too quick and too close. The lead BMP-3 was ripped apart by explosions, rolling the 18-ton vehicle onto its side. 3 others swooped down into fuel tanks, creating a fireball that spread through the convoy, tearing armor and killing dozens in an instant. Next was Phase 2. 40 quadcopters with anti-tank mines moved forward, tempting gunfire. Each round that hit them detonated in mid-air, showering razor-sharp shrapnel in a 100-foot radius. Entire platoons were wiped out in an instant. Panic gripped the column. Tankers deserted their machines, APC drivers careened into ditches, and supply trucks jackknifed, unloading ammunition onto the pavement. The steel snake was shattering, fire and smoke ripping its body asunder. And just as the Russians stumbled from the drone attack, a new roar swelled out of the south, the high-pitched shriek of motorcycle engines. 200 dirt bikes, one carrying a driver and the other a gunner with RPGs and guided missiles, spread out in 3 wings across the fields. The south wing plunged head-on through smoke and debris, the north swept around wide to cut into the side, and the rear wing sprinted to cut off escape. At 300 yards, rockets ran into a T-90, exploding its fuel cell and sending the 12-ton turret flying. Additional tanks were struck, crews leaping from the flames to be cut down by scorching small arms fire. The defense was stubborn, autocannons ripped through earth and men, but the Ukrainians pushed on, destroying APCs at point-blank range. Next came the killing blow from the rear wing, missiles landing on 2 fuel trucks, each carrying almost 5,000 gallons of diesel. The twin fireballs illuminated the battlefield as suns, encasing the Russian convoy in a cage of fire and smoke. Shore, leaving the isolated Marines to perish alone. The blast propelled a towering pillar of flame over 150 feet high, setting alight surrounding cargo trucks carrying mortar rounds and initiating a ruinous chain reaction of secondary explosions. Within less than a quarter of an hour, the previously disciplined Russian convoy disintegrated into a jumbled string of blazing wreckage, ringed by high-speed motorcycles that gave the enemy no opportunity to catch their breath.